This video is about my experience with Monster Hunter World after playing Wilds. For some context, Monster Hunter Wilds was the first Monster Hunter I ever played from start to finish. I was enthralled with the combat and the nuance of it all. I had tried Monster Hunter back on my 3DS a few years ago, and I had so much trouble wrapping my head through the whole thing. So much so that I dropped it after about 2 hours of trying. I was young, I was dumb, and I was impatient, but I am so happy that I gave Monster Hunter another shot. As far as I can tell, Wild seems to be the peak of popularity, at least so far, for Monster Hunter. And a lot of people like myself found it very enjoyable. Despite its performance issues, the game was a breath of fresh air, especially for somebody like myself who had just finished doing his Avowed review. I was so immersed in my experience and enjoyed fighting ridiculously cool monsters that I just assumed that everyone felt the same way that I did. And yes, there was a huge number of people who enjoyed Wilds and still do, but there was a particularly large group of people that I would see in comment sections saying that World was better. So I finished high rank in Wilds. I got what I thought was a decent loadout, a decent Ardian weapon, and I did the next logical thing. I bought Monster Hunter World and all its DLC. Monster Hunter World is what I would genuinely consider one of the best last generation games that I have ever played. I'm surprised that I missed out during its initial launch. I think I have fallen into that group that I mentioned before that thinks World is better than Wilds. And please, before you leave any comments, I do want to talk about something that I've noticed about the Monster Hunter community. It seems like there's a war between the OG fans of the series and the newer fans, kind of like myself, that have started in World and Wilds. Many people complaining that Wilds is too easy or too streamlined are the ones who started in World. All the while, the Monster Hunter fans who began earlier during Generation 3 or 4 had similar complaints when World came out, saying that the game got too easy, too streamlined, that the monsters could not keep up with the players. I thought this was very interesting because I've only really played through World and Wild so far and playing through Rise at the time of this recording. And for me, the difficulty spike between Wild and World is very, very real. I hardly ever found myself getting carded in Wilds. Even with poor positioning and poor timing, I never felt like I was getting a real challenge. And I thought to myself that maybe I had just improved as a gamer since the first time I tried Monster Hunter on my 3DS. I've played through the Dark Souls series and Elden Ring. I thought that I've gotten pro. I'm good now. But in reality, Wilds just gave me a false sense of confidence. So to those of you who started Monster Hunter in Generation 3 or 4 or even before that, kudos to you, because that must have been real tough. For real. But for me, I have to admit that if it wasn't for Wilds easing me into the experience, I'm not sure if I would have even dived into the older games of the series. And as I'm playing through Rise right now, I'm starting to feel my confidence grow as I familiarize myself with more weapons and the combat system in general. I'm actually really excited to jump into the older generations and experience those later down the line as well. But before that, let's talk about why I consider Monster Hunter World to potentially be a modern masterpiece. And I want to start the discussion with gameplay because this is where I feel the biggest difference between World and Wilds. Wilds had this amazing seamless world with camps sprinkled throughout the map, while World's locations felt more confined. However, I did end up loving the way that World handled their locations so much more. Although they are designed somewhat similar, there are two things that Wilds does differently that completely overhauls how you explore all the areas. The first thing is the removal of tracking down monsters, and the second is the addition of the secret. I have feelings about both these things, but let's begin with the removal of tracking. In World, you choose a quest from your handler, and you are then transported to the map where the monster is. You'll start the camp that you choose to land on, and from there, you'll begin searching for clues on where the monster could be located. These can be footprints, claw marks, scales, feathers, whatever you could find of the monster. They all help your scout flies locate where it's at in the map. And at first, I absolutely hated the tracking system. I yearned for my secret to just scoop me up and take me straight to the monster. But as I kept playing, I started to really admire this system more and more. For starters, the more you hunt specific monsters, the easier your scout flies can find the monster in later hunts. And if you hunted the monster enough to max out your investigation points, you can just spawn right next to it sometimes. This was a really cool way for the game to reward players for fighting the same monster multiple times. But the best part about this system, by far, is how you familiarize yourself with the maps of the game. Since you'll be traversing so much of the map looking for the monsters, you will find yourself memorizing much of the locations. So much so that I knew where some monsters would be before I even had found any of their clues. The Diablos will usually be in his pit in the Wildspire Waste. Rathalos likes to hide in Area 17 in the Ancient Forest. I never really got this familiar with the maps of Wilds, even though I have similar playtime for both these games. And I think I know why. It's this guy's fault. The secret is a blessing and a curse for Wilds. In one hand, it does streamline the entire Monster Hunter experience and gets you straight into the action since they just know where the monster is. But on the other hand, you really do lose a lot of the immersion of hunting that you had in World. I never felt connected to any of the areas and never really cared to familiarize myself with the locales, since I knew if I had to go anywhere or farm anything, I can just click on it in my minimap and my secret would just take me there. And it's unfortunate because the environments in Wilds look amazing, but you hardly ever take any time to enjoy it because you're typically just running past everything. I really can't think of any other video game that gives me the same experience as World did when it came to hunting enemies. I know it's probably not the only video game that does a system like this, but it's the first one that I have ever played, so it was new to me. But funny enough, if I hadn't played through Wilds beforehand, this tracking system might have actually turned me off from playing Monster Hunter entirely. Again, the fact that Wilds eased me into the experience is really what helped me push through that barrier. Moving on to the combat. I mentioned before that I hardly ever carded in Wilds, but found World to be very difficult at times. I'm far from an expert in Monster Hunter, but I'm going to try to explain why I think that is. There is a much larger focus on crafting in Monster Hunter World than there is in Wilds. I hardly ever felt the need to craft in Wilds. I did, but I never felt like I needed to in order to progress the story. And in World, there were times in this game that I truly felt that I might be stuck here unless I farm a new weapon or some new armor. I am convinced there is not a single fight in base Wilds harder than Nergigante. And that's a shame because the hard boss fights in World is what made it so memorable for me. I remember how daunting and difficult Diablos felt the first time I fought him. I thought to myself that there was absolutely no way I was actually going to be able to defeat him. And when I did, it felt like I beat Radon with no summons. I had that same feeling. And unfortunately, that feeling was almost nowhere to be found in Wilds. Again, I enjoy Wilds, but it almost feels like I was playing an entirely different series. But in the end of the day, it is still Monster Hunter because no other video game does weapons like Monster Hunter does. There's 14 to choose from in World and Wilds, and I've used all of them at this point, but would say I only really have gotten familiar with 3 of them. In Wilds, I played with the longsword, dual blades, and bow, and in Worlds, I went full donk with the greatsword. And after my World playthrough with the greatsword, I went back to Wilds to do a playthrough with the greatsword, and I'm just gonna be honest, the greatsword in World is so much better than the one in Wilds. I don't know what it is. It just has more oomph to it. I don't know why. But the weapons is another thing that I hear a lot of people complain about when it comes to Wilds. I didn't see it at first, but I think I understand where they're coming from now. In Wilds, it seems like every single weapon has gotten buffed in some way, but monsters have not. Weapons are faster, your secret can get you out of bad positioning, but worst of all, we now have focus mode. In World, when I swung my greatsword, I made a decision, and whether it was going to land on the monster or not was up to the gods. But in Wilds, when I swing any weapon, I never feel like I could miss. I could just focus mode and use my infinite combo on the monsters without ever feeling like I'm opening up myself for punishment. I think the addition of focus mode and wounds was just a really big piece on why it feels so much easier than World. I love the gameplay for both, but I'm quenching my butt cheeks while I'm playing World, and I'm kind of just chilling when I'm playing Wilds. Monster Hunter World just has such gratifying combat. It's something that you truly feel you are improving on as you keep putting hours into the game. The difference you feel when booting up a new save file after 100 hours of gameplay is like night and day compared to your first time around. The only other series that ever gave me an experience close to this was the Dark Souls series and Elden Ring. There are only a few games that can truly provide this experience for players. It really is something special. And now, before I finish talking about the gameplay, I do want to talk about the Clutch Claw. I have seen so many videos about people complaining that the Clutch Claw ruined the combat in Monster Hunter World. And it's kind of hard for me to say. I played World with the DLC installed for my first playthrough, so I had access to the Clutch Claw the whole time. But I'm really glad that I read up on it before I got to the DLC, because it's almost necessary to use in the DLC areas. The reason for this is because monsters had received a significant health boost once you hit the DLC. And the best way to even the odds versus these monsters is to create weak points with the Clutch Claw. But it never really bothered me because I always had the Clutch Claw, and once I learned how to properly use it, I just started to integrate it into my gameplay. It felt like I was just progressing my skills like I had been doing throughout my entire journey in Monster Hunter. But I can see how it could be frustrating for players who played through base Monster Hunter World without it, then having it essentially shoved down their throats when Iceborne came out. So there's my acknowledgement of the Clutch Claw. I personally don't hate it, but I do think some of the complaints are justified. But let's move on to the story. How does it compare to Wilds? And, well, it's alright. I won't take up too much time talking about it because does anyone really play Monster Hunter for the story? I'm asking for a friend. But the story is essentially you play as a hunter in the 5th Fleet, sent to the New World to study massive beasts called Elder Dragons. One in particular, the Zora Magdaros, is migrating across the sea, and your job is to figure out why. But you soon uncover that it's part of its natural life cycle tied to the land's ecosystem. All the while, the new baddie of the series, Nergigante, threatens to mess that all up. And once you finish base game of Monster Hunter World, you get access to Iceborne story. And that begins with the Legiana migration leading all hunters to the Hoarfrost Reach, where you will encounter more powerful monsters and uncover a new cool ancient elder dragon called the Valkana, who's a piece of shit. And as you continue the story, you find you guessed it, another huge monster threatening the entire ecosystem. So yeah, pretty basic stuff. And the best part is you can't skip the cutscenes. I can't seem to find a clear answer into why Capcom insisted on not letting you skip cutscenes. Some people say they didn't want players to skip cutscenes because this was the first time they full sended on the story and the cutscenes. And others say they just used it to cover up loading screens. And regardless, it's dumb. This was probably the most annoying thing about this game. It's not horrible your first time around, but it's really aggravating for subsequent playthroughs. Believe me, you are going to want to skip some of these cutscenes after the first time you watch them because some of these characters are just so boring. None of them offended me by any means, and I don't understand all the handler hate online, but I do understand that many of these characters are just one-dimensional. They hardly contribute to the story at all, and they all gather around me after every hunt like we did something, and none of them help me ever. which this is actually something that Wilds remedies by giving you the option to use SOS flares offline by calling NPC hunters from the camp to come help you. So good job. But all my gripes with the story and the characters is just super small because the story is very much put in the back burner. It's not a big enough deal for me because the combat and the hunting is just so goddamn addicting. And it looks amazing while you're doing it. I think Monster Hunter World and Iceborne is one of the most beautiful games I have ever played. It's definitely a last gen game, but it holds up so well. Playing this game in 2025 on high-end hardware feels amazing. And it of course runs so much better than Wilds does at this moment. I understand the details and characters of fauna, the monsters is much improved in Wilds, but I don't think the jump of details is worth the hit on performance in Wilds. So personally, I take Monster Hunter World's art style and graphics over Wilds any day. The monsters look amazing and the cutscenes are really badass. And speaking of monsters, they are a huge highlight for me. I personally enjoyed the roster in Monster Hunter World much more than the base roster in Monster Hunter Wilds. Just comparing both base games together, why does Monster Hunter World have 4 Elder Dragons for endgame and Wilds has 0 but 2 Elder Dragon equivalents in the end of the game? I appreciate the roster in Wilds since they have so much diversity and uniqueness, but I would be lying if I didn't say that my monkey brain definitely enjoyed all the T-Rex and dragons that World was able to provide. Again, only comparing the base games because we don't have DLC for Wilds and all of the community updates and all that, so it has the potential to have an even better roster by the end of it. I am also happy to report that the player base of Monster Hunter World is still very much alive. For very difficult fights, I did call in SOS flares and almost always people were able to join me. I think that's pretty cool that people are still helping others play through this game. I don't think it's very cool that the game insists on me being online all the time. Again, a dumb Capcom decision that I don't know why they did. You can still play offline, but it doesn't give you that decision to start the game offline like they do in Wilds. So I'm glad that they fixed it, but it's just really annoying to see that here. Monster Hunter World honestly surprised me. It was a wonderful game to go back to. And if Wilds is your first Monster Hunter experience, like me, I cannot recommend playing through it enough. It has all of the DLC, it has all of the updates, and the roster of monsters is huge. There are so many more monsters in this game than Wilds right now, and they are challenging, they look awesome, and most of all, they are fun. Getting carded in World feels so much more punishing than it did in Wilds since you lose all of your meal buffs and you have to just play more mindful. It's a challenge that I'm happy to see, because I've been looking for a game to give me this feeling since Elden Ring. And I do plan on playing the older generations of Monster Hunter one day. So if you are interested in seeing that, please consider hitting the subscribe button. And some channel updates, we were able to confirm a pre-order for the Switch 2, so we will be doing an unboxing and likely a review. So please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting so I can afford this Switch 2. It is so freaking expensive. I'm never going to financially recover from this. Anyways, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful day and a great weekend. I love you. Bye-bye.